In this video, we're going to do a follow-up review of the Henry Lever Action 4570 with the side loading gate, and specifically, we're going to do an accuracy update. If you watched the previous video on my initial review of the 4570, you'll note that we had some performance or some accuracy issues out of the rifle, and I've had a lot of people inquire since then as to what has been the status of the rifle since that time. So now I have an update on that. We completed the initial review back in February of 2021, and as you know from the video, we discovered some poor accuracy performance out of the rifle. Upon release of the video, I was immediately contacted by the heads at Henry, including the president of the company, and promptly shipped back the rifle for testing. Since that time, I was informed that they did some rigorous testing on the rifle. They measured it, they recrowned the barrel, they chamber-free bore dimensionally checked the rifle. They even rebarreled the rifle and ran both jacketed as well as lead bullets and found the same results that I had, which is a high level of inconsistency and poor performance of the rifle. So on April 13th, I was mailed back a replacement rifle, and with that was included a communication indicating that their own internal testing showed that they received the following groups out of this particular rifle. Using Federal Fusion 300 grain, they were able to fire 1-inch groups. Hornady Lever Evolution 325 grain, they got 1 1/4 inch groups, and then the Winchester Silver Tips, they were getting 300 grains, they were getting 1-inch groups out of the rifle. Now these are shooting a little bit smaller loads than what I typically like to shoot. When I shoot my 4570s, I like the heavier loads. So I like shooting typically hard cast loads as well as 405 grain up to 430 grain, including the Underwood ammo here, which is my favorite and preferred load out of 4570. Now, as far as the testing was concerned, again, I did the same bench rest test using a Weaver 2x7 scope, which is what I want to run on this rifle. If I wanted to really do more accuracy testing, I would probably run a better scope on the rifle, but this is what I'm going to mount and use on the rifle, which is all that mattered. I would also note before we showed some of the testing that there was a strong crosswind from left to right. It kicked up about 8 to 10 miles an hour at the time of our testing, so that did impact some of the accuracy. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there before we begin. So the final thing I would indicate is that there are limited options of ammunition in the market. At the time of the filming of this, as you probably know, ammunition is hard to come by, so I had a limited amounts of ammunition I could use for the testing. So I used the ones that I typically use the most, which is the Underwood ammo, the S&B, and then of course the Black Hills, just to give a good variation of accuracy. Now, looking back at the previous results that we had received on the old rifle with the accuracy issues, with the Black Hills, again, you saw a fairly large group. The Remington Corlocks, even larger group. These were the old rifle groupings that were problematic when I did my last testing, and then of course the Underwood ammo. Now when I compared that, for example, to testing that we did on the previous video in comparison to the Marlin 1895, these were the types of groups I got out of the 1895. Again, using the exact same scope and the same setup, bench rest, everything. And as you could tell, they were much tighter groups that I received out of the 1895 compared to the old original Henry that we did the testing on. So now, as far as the new groups that I fired out, again, they're just 3-round groups. And again, the caveat with this was there was a strong crosswind left to right. So usually when I see a large variation from left to right, it usually indicates to me that that has more to do with the wind than anything. But in this case, I fired three rounds out for each one of these. The Underwood 430 grain, the S&B 405 grain, as well as the Black Hills 405 grain load. So again, much tighter groups. Now I'm not too worried about the Black Hills. This isn't something that I would usually use for accuracy, but the Underwood certainly is there, and then the S&B I would have closer to that. But again, the performance is much better than what I received on the previous Henry rifle. Now, is it as good as the Marlin 1895 testing that I did under the exact same conditions? Not quite, but it's pretty good, all things considered. In fact, it's good enough for what I wanted to use the rifle for and for testing that this would pass for me. Now, the one thing about this I would also add is once I got this dialed in at 100 yards, I was also doing some volley fire, some fire out to 200 yards consistently on 12 by 12 inch plates. And with both of the rounds, the SMB as well as the Underwood, I was consistently hitting 12 by 12 inch plates out to 200 yards with the 45-70 at the range. Once I got my holds and the scope dialed in for the particular rounds that I was firing. And to me, that's good enough. That's what I want on a 45-70 as far as accuracy is concerned. So it is a much better, more accurate rifle than the previous one I had. So thank you, Henry, for sending out a new rifle that has better accuracy than the previous one that I had tested. Now, this leads me to a final thing about getting firearms that I would consider to be lemons, or in the case with the previous Henry, getting a firearm that had accuracy issues that even Henry couldn't quite figure out what it was and had to replace it with. And the one caveat I would put with this is that not every firearm is created equal, and it's also, especially when it comes to accuracy, they're not exactly the same. Each firearm, even though they're produced now with better machining, better qualities, there's still inconsistencies at times, and occasionally lemons do come out. In fact, the variation on the quality of rifles and the accuracy, dates even back to Winchester back in the late 1800s. They would release what were called their 1 in 1,000 or their super accurate rifles, which basically they were able to determine, now whether it's for marketing reasons or actually legitimate reasons, they made the assertion that 1 in 1,000 rifles really turned out to be super accurate rifles, and those are actually highly sought after Winchesters today. But it also illustrates the fact that even under really tight manufacturing conditions, there is some variation in what comes out. Now, some manufacturers, even the best manufacturers, can still produce lemon firearms. It just happens. For example, I once had a Glock 17 a number of years ago, and I sent it back. And it still wasn't right when I got it, and I eventually got rid of it. Does that mean that I fault the manufacturers for this? No, not really, especially if they respond quickly and correctly like Henry did in replacing this rifle. So this is why, however, it's important to point out that it's important to check your firearms when you buy them. Now, in the case with poor accuracy, this happens afterwards. So this is something that I really couldn't tell until after I took the firearm home and then ultimately tested on it. But there are occasionally lemons that come out, even from some of the best manufacturers in the industry. So it's also an important reason why it's good to buy from manufacturers that have really good customer service departments like Henry, in this case to rectify, or in this case replace, the rifle that was a lemon as far as when it came out from an accuracy perspective. So final thoughts, just as previously observed before, this is still an exceptional value, a beautiful gun, really high quality alternative to many of the declining quality firearms in the market. And now it's got the side loading gate, as I previously alluded to earlier. So Henry's got me. I love their rifles. The only suggestion I would have for Henry when they watch this video would be to people like me. I really like the pistol grip stock configuration, and I like this on all of my 30-30s when I can get them, my newer production 30-30s. So in your 30-30s that you're producing, it would be great if you could add this feature as well, because it's something I really like on the 45-70. So that is an update, an accuracy update on the Henry 45-70 side loading gate. If you like this video or like this channel, please subscribe on YouTube, and thanks for watching.